Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace podcast. Back for another season reviewing the Scottish Premiership weekend action. I am your host Craig Fowler, and on this occasion I am joined by Craig Anderson. Hello Craig.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you after the first weekend of action? Probably not that great from a Killie supporter point of view, I would say. I haven't been gubbed at Celtic Park, but then if you're going to lose 4-0 in their first game of the season to anybody, that's probably the team and the venue that would throw up the least amount of red flags. I think it's fair to say.
We'll go into it when we talk about the game, but it's actually kind of the ideal first game of the season when it's in between all the European games. Like, why not just have a game that you're going to lose anyway, rather than like something else. So yeah, not the best given it's 2 defeats in 4 days or whatever it is, but again, two away defeats to teams that are probably just better than us is not that worrying. But apart from that, I was away at Arran for the weekend, so I had a nice time over there. Weather was better than expected until the very, very choppy ferry home, which was unpleasant because it was the normal ferry's fine, but it was on that kind of sea cat type one. It's just really bumpy, so not a lot of passengers enjoying that trip home, but made it in one piece, so yeah, fine.
Well, I'm glad to hear you didn't perish in the sea before this. I've really put a downer on this season for us all.
Well, I was going to say that this episode in particular would be quite boring as well, wouldn't
it? Just me giving a tribute to you and then talking through the 5 games myself. So yeah, I've given a sneak peek to what's happening here on this show. I did say it's 5 games. That is because the Aberdeen against St Johnstone at McDermott Park is taking place later this evening. We're recording this late on Monday afternoon, and that match kicks off at 8 o'clock tonight, so it won't be done for the back of 10. So you really can ask it a lot for somebody else to join me on this podcast and talk about weekend fixtures when you're not even going to get finished until like the back of 11, and then I'm not going to be finished like editing videos and the podcast and uploading until like 1 in the morning at least. So instead of that, we'll just talk about the 5 games that happened over the course of Saturday and Sunday, and then it will be Tom Watt and Gary Cocker who will appear on a Patreon episode together to talk about the game between St Johnstone and Aberdeen. And if you want to listen to that, you will have to subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. Right, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to what was undoubtedly the most exciting game of the weekend, and that was the return of the Dundee derby. It rarely ever seems to disappoint in the top flight. We always kind of say, how come the Edinburgh derby can't be like this one? And I'd said that on Twitter, and I had some people replying saying, well, it means more in the Edinburgh derby and they have better defenders. Yeah, but it probably means a little bit even more when it's Celtic and Rangers, and they certainly have better defenders, and their games are better than the Edinburgh derby as well. So that's not really a good reason. But the Dundee derby, always usually a good game, and this certainly was. 2 each, the final score, with Dundee United twice taking the lead and Dundee pegging them back. And Craig, the first question just to ask you is, are Dundee United, based on what we've seen from this and in the Premier Sports Cup, going to join their neighbours and being one of the better teams to watch in this league?
I think they will, because they have the perfect combination. If you want to be an entertaining team, you have to have good attacking players. You need to have a kind of creative attacking players, and we've seen quite a lot that they definitely have those. And you also have to have not be very good at defending, and I think we saw in parts in this game that is also the case for Dundee United. So given like Jim Goodwin's teams, I always thought have been pretty good value to watch in his other 2 spells in the Premiership. So yeah, there's no reason to suspect that they won't be one of the better teams in the division, I think, from an entertainment point of view. But I think you also saw the downside of that, because a more streetwise team would have won that game. They should have won that game and they didn't. So there is that entertainment value there, but it sometimes comes at the cost of points.
I wonder about, Goodwin said that after the game they praised the back 3 for being outstanding, said the Ross Graham moment was kind of a blip otherwise. I'm not entirely certain about that. I think they played reasonably well overall, but still Kevin Holt wasn't great for the first goal, and yeah, Graham just lunging in on Murray to give away the penalty. But while he heaped praise on them, I thought United were the better team in the first half. Second half, I think it's hard to argue at all that Dundee were the better side, but that was because they were kind of allowed to have the initiative. Now, yes, Dundee United did have a goal to defend and Dundee had to chase something. So chances are you would expect Dundee to have a lot more of the ball for the territory to be more in United's half. But I still thought even for that, it was quite extreme. And I felt like Dundee United kind of sat back quite a bit and defended what they had. And I wonder if that's to do with not having full confidence that your defence is as good as the rest of your team.
I think there is something for that, and I think we've seen it with Goodwin as well, that it does tend to be how he tries to sit on a lead, but I think despite that, like, they had the chances there to win the game as well, so it wasn't, I think it's very much sit very deep, but spring the counter-attack, and it's hard to say with them, but yeah, I think it's pretty clear to me that, like, Graham, for all the praise that he got very briefly for some reason and the season ended up getting relegated, it's just not, he's still relatively young, he could get better, but not necessarily a Premiership centre half at this point. Gallagher and Holt, Gallagher certainly was at one stage, but he's not getting any younger. He was never the quickest. He's not been a regular in the Premiership for like 2 years at this point. Obviously, having spent last year in the Championship, and he wasn't playing as much for St Mirren the year before. And Kevin Holt, we've not really seen him loads as a Premiership centre-back because he was mainly a left-back, and most of the time he's played at this level. But
and rubbish one at that.
Yeah, I've doubts there as well. So it doesn't necessarily follow that three bad centre-back or three medium to poor centre-backs will make a really bad defence, because sometimes organisation, shape and all the rest of it is more than enough. I think you see other teams who don't really have that many good defenders and yet they have a good defensive record, and they could do that, but I think they also, you talk about the protection, they sat back and it was but to me it's lots of attacking midfield players sitting on front of a defence rather than having lots of really particularly strong defensive-minded players in midfield, which I think was a big problem with Dundee United when they got relegated. Has that been resolved? I mean, maybe someone like Ross Docherty would make a difference there, but again, talking of unproven Premiership players, but he is at least someone who is that type of more defence-minded, better at breaking up play. I think there's as many questions as there were answers for Dundee United. They were better as an attacking team than I thought they would be, but they look quite open. Or if they're not open, then disorganised, because I think the second goal...
Lack of balance is probably what you're saying, because you're talking about that. Like, if you look at the two teams, and I'll probably just mention this now, like, for instance, for Dundee, you had Mohamed Salah, who I thought had an excellent game, just doing... It's the kind of guy you always kind of need in a derby match. Somebody that's just going to constantly be there as the ball's pinging around, just to win it back, to throw his weight around and to halt the opposition. There was so many times he won back possession for Dundee. I thought he was brilliant, and that's what he brings to that role. That's what he does. He doesn't really have anything else to his game other than taking the ball off the opposition. But that's what they need. That's what Dundee need, and that's why that midfield three works very well when you've got the two guys in Cameron and McCowan, who are both look very similar, both are quite lightweight. It's the two kind of players that when you're watching a telly, if you're not watching like a game intently, you're just kind of mindlessly enjoying the entertainment of it. He's the kind of guys that you just constantly get mixed up. So they've both got blonde hair as well. So and they're both got a similar height, similar build, but they're able to do that because they've got this great protector behind them. Whereas for United, it's Sibbald and Babunski playing in the midfield. And I did wonder, before having seen him, I'd heard that he'd got really good reviews in the Premier Sports Cup, but I hadn't seen him play. I wonder whether Babunski was going to be that guy that kind of just sat further back. Like he's 30 now, so I just kind of had it in my head that he was going to be this responsible, defensive-minded, kind of experienced player who would stop the opposition, get his foot on the ball, dictate play. But instead, on evidence of this one, he's somebody that very much likes to get forward and likes to try and thread through balls, as he showed in the build-up to the opening goal, and also get on the end of chances, as he showed where he ballooned that shot over the bar when he really should have done better. And beside him, Sibbald, who has made himself from the kind of number 10 that he was looked upon at Falkirk into somebody that is more of a battler and does do a lot more running, But again, he's kind of a very kind of small player, and they don't really seem to have that kind of type that will provide proper balance to that team. And therefore, yeah, they might be weak at the back throughout this season, but going back to my original question I asked you, they should be a team that's good to watch, because in addition to Babinski, Trapanovsky had quite a promising debut. Thought he fell out of it quite a bit as the game went on, but first half he was very much involved, got the goal, had another chance. Then he had the great chance in the second half where he went on that 2-on-1, but it certainly showed. Miller Thompson, somebody else, young player, getting the start for United, very good as well. I also was very impressed by Will Ferry on the opposite side. He was a name that, well, you're signing a couple of North Macedonians with international experience, you're going to get kind of lost in the shuffle, but he could stake a claim to being United's best player on the park. So, there's certainly a lot going forward for them. Just one thing I wanted to ask you. So I was curious about this, and I know that they mentioned it on commentary, and we even kind of thought as well that if Dundee United didn't win the game, which they didn't, whether Goodwin was going to go back to this. United had a massive chance to kill it off, where Trapanovsky going through terrible defending for Dundee from a set piece where everybody just got sucked too far forward, and it left Trapanovsky just with a clear route to goal. He's getting chased down by Lyle Cameron. He opts to dink the ball over John McCracken, which was the wrong decision, because you can see that he has a look as he's running, and you can see that Cameron is right on his tail. And to produce a finish that means the ball's going to slow down, like rather than, just kind of hit a normal shot or go round the goalkeeper, and then you can get a bit of power and try to beat Cameron running back. He does that. Cameron gets it off the line, but McCracken does take him out. Now, VAR looked at it, didn't think there was a case to answer for. What was your take on it?
I'll start on the football side of it, which I agree with you on Trapanovsky, which is, it's obviously a decent enough effort in the sense that he beats the goalkeeper, and the only thing that stops it being a goal is brilliant defensive work from Cameron in terms of just the sprint that he puts in. But yeah, you're right. By that point, he should know that type of effort is probably not going to make it. I agreed with it. I listened to the Football Cliches podcast over the summer, where it was Gary Lineker was talking about just strikers not really going around goalkeepers anymore. That was a prime situation to go around the goalkeeper, because as we'll get on to discuss, the keeper's out his box, McCracken's out his box, so he can't use his hands at that point either. So the only way he's going to be able to defend you is, well, if he uses his hands, he's going to get sent off. Or he makes a tackle. It's the easiest thing to do, to knock it to the side of him. And yeah, you've got to still deal with Cameron bearing down on you, but there's also a decent chance Cameron then just careers right into his goalkeeper anyway. But even if he sees it coming, it's hard for him to defend you as well. So I think it was a perfect situation for a player to go around the goalkeeper, and he probably scores. In terms of what did happen after that, I think it's an interesting one in all the various parts of VAR. First of all, clearly it's a foul. I don't think there's any doubt that it is a foul. But I think the argument from the referee at the time was probably that there was an advantage accrued by the fact that the shot got away and it was trickling towards goal. As soon as there's nothing given on the park there's two things that VAR can intervene on, because it can't intervene on yellow cards, it can't intervene on free kicks. It can only intervene on a penalty, and it can only intervene on a red card. And first of all, and that's the one that they were clearly checking, it's not a penalty, the contact that falls outside the box, so it can't be a penalty. So then you've got to ask the question of whether it's a potential red card, and to me it isn't, because for it to be a red card you have to deny a clear and obvious goal scoring opportunity, but he didn't deny it because the shot had already been taken by the time the foul was committed.
I guess you could argue that with the finish that he went for, if McCracken didn't take him out, he could have kept running and got to the ball before Cameron. I'm not entirely sure that would have happened, but I think that was the case he was making immediately after it.
I don't buy that, because just the momentum of taking a shot, even if the goalkeeper's not there, I think Cameron is probably beating him to that ball. And I think that comes into the other thing, which I hope is followed through, which is that before the start of the season, Willie Collum, who's now the head of referees, said that they wanted the bar to be a lot higher for VAR intervening in decisions. We've seen that in a few incidents at the weekend. Hopefully that continues, because to me, there is nowhere near enough in that for that ever to be considered a red card. I don't think it's a red card even without the intervention, so I certainly don't think VAR should be getting involved to make it one. So I think, and Goodwin, because I know there was speculation during the game, we were chatting about it, but I think Goodwin seemed to focus post-match on how big a chance it was rather than the decision, is what I felt. So I'm glad that wasn't given that way.
Moving on to Dundee before we talk about the next game, I think it's fair to say that any kind of pre-season pessimism that's re-signing Simon Murray and spending 6 figures to re-sign him and giving him a 3-year deal. I mean, it might end up looking like a daft signing at the end of those 3 years, but for the meantime, it certainly looks like Murray is continuing to be that improved player that he was that we saw at Ross County last year, when he was undoubtedly their player of the season, helped keep them up, and now he's looking like he can very much be the man to kind of spearhead Dundee's attack for another top 6 finish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing I like about strikers like him is that when they're able to drift out and occupy wide areas, but it doesn't come at the detriment of like still being in the box for chances. So you saw it for the penalty. Ultimately, he's the one that drifts out into that kind of wide left channel, and there was another couple of times. I think for the first goal, he's kind of more in a wider area when he's originally kind of winning the ball. He's physical. He runs and he runs and he runs. I don't suspect actually his fitness will drop off in that stage. I think he's one that will keep himself fit, even, because he's not necessarily super quick. He's got a good acceleration. He's fit, but it's not like he's relying on blistering pace. So I think there's a lot of his game that has improved with time. I think he used to be a bit of a headless chicken, and I think he's probably just got a bit better at knowing where to be. And I think we will see goals from him. We obviously saw 5 in 2 Premiership Cup games that he started. I think he didn't get a goal in this one, but he was a big part of what Dundee did. The cross to set up Curtis Main for that miss, which I think is actually not as easy a chance as it looks, but he probably should score, is sensational, because he does some great work down the wing, but then it's the outside of the foot cross is pinpoint. So yeah, a lot to like about Murray's performance. I don't know. You're probably more of a Murray skeptic than me anyway. What did you make?
Do you know what? Wasn't a Murray skeptic at all. I thought it was one of the first people to flag up last year how great a season he was having, and how he's so much improved, and how he's doing it at this point in his career is just a great story. And you always kind of love stuff like that, because footballers are supposed to follow the kind of typical career trajectory of showing potential. 17 to 21, becoming a top player 21 to 24, reaching their peak 24 to 27, starting to decline slightly but still being good 27 to 30, and then declining for that point forward. Whereas Murray was at his very, very best in a season in which he turned 32, and I think he'll turn 33 towards the end of this season. I was just sceptical about the fact that Dundee, like with Bakayoko going and kind of some of the other loan players as well. I know some of them were kind of more defensive, but Owen Beck was obviously a kind of big attacking player for them. To try and remodel their attack around somebody of that age and to give him a 3-year deal was, I thought, kind of... And also a player coming back to a former club in which he hadn't really... I think he was only on loan before, wasn't he, at Dundee? So it wasn't
just
like...
half a season, but...
Yeah, he didn't really have too much time to make an impact. And I think I do remember him scoring a couple of goals. But still, it's one of those ones where you just kind of... There was just a lot of red flags for a club like Dundee hoping to stay in the top 6, making that kind of signing. But already after one game, I'm like, nah, I was wrong on that. He's going to be perfectly fine in terms of that addition. A couple of signings that, I mean, I know he got the goal, but I wasn't entirely convinced by Seb Palmer-Houlden alongside him. And I do wonder whether Main can get that kind of jersey alongside Murray, because I think they would... If Main, and I said this in the preview show, if Main can return to the form he showed at St Mirren before he left for India, then that would be huge, because him and Murray would suit each other well in that case. But it was I think the most disappointed I was with the Dundee team was the wing backs, because there was a lot of players going into this match going to be excited about. I'd heard good things about their League Cup exploits and just kind of their pedigrees as well. And we've talked about the Dundee United boys. The Dundee boys I was really looking forward to seeing was Larkesh, who's coming for QPR on the left, and Ethan Ingram on the right. And neither of them really done all that much. And I'm not going to say anything like kind of big picture. It's the first game. It's a derby match away from home. You could certainly understand them being maybe a bit more tense, not playing with as much freedom as they normally would. But these guys were kind of advertised as attack-minded wing-backs to make that 3-5-2 system work. And it's a system that has worked well for Dundee, both in the sense of getting results and being a good team to watch, because they're one of the few teams in the league that actually, playing with a three at the back, has the players to actually do it. And there's a couple of teams in particular who lack those type of players that we'll talk about at the very end of the show. But yeah, both of them seem to play with a bit of the handbrake on, but I think that was maybe more to do with the occasion than them as players.
Yeah, I think we spoke about, me and Tom spoke about Larkesh on the one of the transfer podcasts on Patreon, and he played on paper. It looks like he played a lot of games in the Championship, and then it's like they're all like 3-minute sub appearances. So I think he's not played loads of football, so it might take him a wee while to kind of get up to speed. But he should have a bit of pedigree about him. And yeah, that in itself, like Ingram, the same, I think, hasn't necessarily had lots of football under his belt. So sometimes with these guys, you're basically not always going to get an Owen Beck. Like, that's a rarity to be able to get a guy who is a lone player who comes in and adapts quickly. But I think it's a long season. It's not always about being brilliant in the first weekend, but maybe these guys will be up to speed by September, and that's also fine. Or they might be rubbish. Who knows?
Right, let's move on to our second game, which took place also on Sunday. It was a match that kicked off while our first game was still going on, and that was St Mirren 3, Hibs 0. I've just noticed right now that in my notes I've got the Celtic score wrong. We're just going to change that. I stopped watching it at 3-0, but that game finished 4-0. But anyway, St Mirren 3, Hibs 0. And all the goals coming for the hosts in the second half, after what was a fairly even encounter in the first half. Hibs were the better team early on. St Mirren kind of settled into it. And then it was kind of anybody's game after the break. But St Mirren, much better team in the second interval. And Craig, I think this was a case of Stephen Robinson winning the game with his substitutes, but also showing that this could be another team that signed particularly well during the summer and have really kind of bolstered their squad.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, I always find it, and maybe you're just trying to look for narrative at that point, but you've got half-time, a game that's pretty even going into the second half, and you've got a manager who has been round the block a lot in the Scottish Premiership against a rookie who's basically not managed at all. And you see that it's the guy who's got lesser resources available to him and probably not necessarily as strong a bench, who is able to change it with the bench that he has to win his team the game. And maybe, as I say, maybe you're just reading into things and maybe it's just like pure chance in this case, but you sometimes wonder about the fact Hibs didn't appoint a manager. They appointed, the guy who was already in the building, who was probably cheap, rather than, going out. What difference that will make. Whereas Robinson, for all the faults you can probably have with him, that there are limitations to what he does as a manager. He is very good at getting results. He's very good at recruitment, and he's very good at putting a team on the park that embodies like everything that you know what a Stephen Robinson team looks like. It's two amazing results for them in the space of a few days, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. And as you said, it was the introduction. Obviously, Oisin Smith will get most of the plaudits in terms of being the guy who come off the bench and scores 2 goals. But you've got James Scott, who came on and set them both up against his former club, and you've got Jayden Brown, who made a difference down the left. So it's interesting. You talked about recruitment. Like, Brown is in the same sort of category as Boyd Munce was last season, in that it's actually a guy who he had in for the second part of the season before. Maybe Scott falls into this category as well. He was in for the second part of the season before, but didn't play much, wasn't really that involved, but then he hits the ground running, in the first full season that he's there. And it'll be interesting whether that's also proves to be the case for Brown coming in, because there are a lot of things to like about what you see from him, but he also looks quite inconsistent, so it's quite a tricky player to judge, I think.
It's certainly huge if Scott becomes something next season. This season, we've already started. I keep forgetting. Because that's the area of the team where St Mirren kind of going into this campaign, you did wonder about, due to the fact that Greg Kiltie was their best attacking midfielder last season, and he's got an injury issue that's going to keep him out for quite a while. Conor McMenamin started last year well. When St Mirren were at their best, he was one of their better players. Then performances dipped a bit, but that was also kind of due to him kind of carrying an injury through parts of the season. He was certainly somebody that was worth having around the squad and added that little bit more depth and could bring on a different option. So he's going to be out for a while as well. And you kind of wondered, are they going to be able to replace these guys? And that's kind of where they want them. Like Scott, that he was at his best in his entire career when he was at a Robinson team at Motherwell that kind of played slightly similar, when he could have played not as a striker, but as a kind of supporting striker or attacking midfielder, kind of drifting out to the left. So if he could have a big season and have a bounce back and show that Stephen Robinson is the James Scott whisperer and he's the only manager capable of getting these performances out of him, then that will be absolutely huge for St Mirren. And just because the other guys, Roland Aduwu, already St Mirren fans are loving this guy. Great finish for that opener. And you mentioned Jayden Brown covering for Scott Tanser. I thought that was a big one because Tanser, so we talked about this on the preview show where I thought that Brown playing ahead of Tanser was a strange one in Europe. I thought that Tanser, with his crossing ability, is exactly the right man you want on the left of midfield, because he can then hang up crosses to the back post for Sean Rooney to attack. And I think
talking of new signings.
Yeah, talking of new signings. And I think you even saw in this one that Brown's crossing's not as good as Tanser, but he certainly had a better game than Tanser. Tanser, the first half, like talking about wing backs playing with a handbrake on, he didn't get forward an awful lot. His touch looked really poor, and he got booked for a foul on Lewis Miller, which gave Hibs a free kick fairly deep into St Mirren territory. He'd already done that earlier in the game with a foul on Martin Boyle after he got beat. He just kind of looked quite out of sorts. And maybe he's just kind of going through a bit of a down spell. And that's why Robinson went for Brown in the European away game. And that's why Brown coming on at halftime just gave them much more of a lift, because Brown was just so much more aggressive going down that side. He gets it's not like the most intricate of assists. He passes the ball to Aduwu and Aduwu does the rest. But even there was other times where the crosses maybe weren't great, but just putting the ball into the box and showing that you've got confidence in yourself to do that, it asks questions of the opposing team, whereas Tanser just wasn't really doing anything.
Yeah, I think that this, it's what I feel he's always got is with Tanser, he is a player that drifts in and out, because remember his time at St Johnstone, he would suddenly kind of go through a spell. I think did he not end up dropped for the second half of the season when they won the Cups? I think, didn't Callum Booth take his place?
Yeah, I think that's it.
So he is, for someone who's clearly a good player at this level, he does seem to have these peaks and troughs. So I think it's good that they've got depth. I think you look at that on the bench and the players they brought on. I mentioned it's not necessarily the calibre or the quote unquote calibre of what you see on the Hibs bench, but he's got depth in a lot of different positions. He brings on Iacovitti when he's need a centre half at the end as well. I know that's maybe just getting him minutes, but he's got experienced centre half in Iacovitti. He's got Brown, who's a fullback that offers something a wee bit different to Tanser in his game as well. Tanser's very good at crossing. Brown seems more direct. You've got Mandron didn't start the game. You've got Scott coming on. Smith comes on and scores the goals. And Bomono was on the bench and didn't come on, who's your kind of backup to Rooney in that right wing back position. So he's managed to build a squad that's quite flexible. There's quite a lot of options he has there, and that's even accounting for the two big injuries that you mentioned. So he's done well to kind of put together what I would say is quite a strong squad, and it's something you always felt with these Motherwell teams as well. You're not going to have an easy game, and you've always got that even if you've got the better of them, there's someone that pops up and appears. But what about from a Hibs point of view, if we move on to them, Craig? Dylan Vente, is he the kind of new... We've had these Hibs signings that people talk about the wasting of money, but is he one of the biggest kind of poster boys for bad signings in Scottish football?
It's certainly headed that way. He was somebody that, I said quite recently that I thought Vente was poised to have a good season, because he was somebody that when he first came into the Hibs team, and this is when I was still working for the Evening News and covering Hibs games, so I got to look at him close up on a number of times, even though I left my job in late August of last year. I'd already seen a bit of him thinking, he looks good. He looks like really kind of sharp player around the penalty area. somebody who could finish, and a bit quicker than I thought he was as well. And I just thought, right, with Boyle there, with Johan there, with Newell, Hibs have got the players. They just kind of really lack a reliable goal scorer. Then Lee Johnson gets sacked, and Nick Montgomery comes in and plays Venti as like I think he even said himself, like a defensive forward, like doing lots of running, lots of coming back, and that's clearly not his game. So I was thinking, right, surely now David Gray in charge, Hibs playing a bit of a more direct style. They'll just be like, Venti was saying himself, he's liking playing on the last shoulder defender a lot more. Right, this will be the season where he looks good. He was rubbish in this game, absolutely rubbish. And for 700 grand, the problem with him, and in this system, because Hibs played a 4-2-3-1 with Josh Campbell behind him, so there is no illusions, that is not a 4-4-2. He doesn't really have, like what I said there about him, he's sharp around the penalty area. He's for his career, he's got a good goal record. However, he doesn't really have anything else. Like, there is, like I say, that he was a quicker player than I thought he would be, but he's not fast. He's not strong. Doesn't really play with his back to goal. Doesn't really get involved in the game an awful lot. And even some of his touches in this game, there was the chance that Rudy Monotlikov had in the first half where it was a block shot. But Venti could have been in right away. And he just took that really bad touch, and he recovered it well to do a wee kind of flick to Campbell, and then Campbell moved it along. But it could just be a case that he's a player void of confidence because of how he was utilised last season, and he needs to get a couple of goals in the top flight to really get himself going again. But at this point in time, I mean, everybody remembers the James Collins signing when it was like, I was making a big noise about they paid a couple $100,000 from, and then when it turned out he was rubbish, then could have been, no, we didn't actually pay that much. That was just the newspapers talking. Well, you were quite happy to run with the story when the fans were looking at you as a club that was investing. And yes, $700,000 for Venti. Hibs have re-signed Big Mick. I've already forgotten how to pronounce his surname, Mikolaj Kukarevich. And there's also talk that Kieran Bowie is going to be coming in. You could really see it that sometime in the near future that Venti is the third choice striker at Easter Road.
The one thing I'll say for him is, like, with players like that, you probably get some money back when you sell them back to the Dutch league, who seem to also, I think it's not going to be because of his age. It's not like you're going to lose all that money, but I think everything you described is what you would maybe expect from a player you sign on a free transfer. And it's not, I always think when you go out and spend money on a player, and big money on a player, even for Hibs size, that's big money, you need to have more than just a hunch. I think you need to be, you can always make mistakes, but you need to be much more certain than you were about the quality that you're bringing in, and you need to back that quality. And I think what we're seeing again, it's just a failing of the recruitment structure at Hibs, but it's also interesting because all of the things that you said to describe Venti is what I said when I think Hibs beat Kelly 1-0 last season at Easter Road, and I was describing him as such, and people were jumping down my throat saying, no, he's got much more to his game than that. But no, he's a poacher, he's a finisher, and if he's not finishing, he's not worth anything to you. And you saw two terrible misses, like in that game. Like the second to me worse than the first, where he's like diving in, clearing the ball with like it was like a defender trying to block the ball at the front post.
Yes.
That, like, the first one is kind of instinctive, and it looks terrible, but you can kind of, you have seen misses like that before because the ball kind of bounces up and it takes him unawares. Again, a striker that shouldn't be getting taken unawares, but you can understand it. But it's the technique is just terrible in the second one. So I think maybe it'll come good, but I think you're right. I think it may more likely be that by the end of August he's not a Hibs player anymore. Right,
a couple of other things we could have talked about this game. Pateta making a howler for that back pass that led to St Mirren's second goal. But we've talked for 35 minutes already. We've only covered two matches, so we should probably move on. And let's go to the only other game featuring goals at the weekend, which took place at Celtic Park. Again, on Sunday, Celtic running out 4-0 winners over Killie. Craig, I'll get to talk to you about Killie soon enough, but we should start with the reigning champions. And we would just call them champions-elect right now. Just hand them the title now or what?
The sad thing is I did not expect necessarily that Celtic were going to be up to. I don't mean they were obviously going to be a good team, but I wasn't really expecting them to be great this season. I thought they would still win the league because Rangers looked to be like a bit of a train wreck already. But looking at the business that Celtic did, it's obviously not a lot. They brought in Schmeichel to replace Hart. Strangely, seen a lot of people describing it as that's a really big upgrade. I don't really see it that way. I think it's like a replacement for a perfectly fine and serviceable goalkeeper, which is okay. But they haven't really strengthened much elsewhere. They've brought in guys who were already there last season on permanent deals, or they've done so with Bernardo. There's talks that Ida will be coming the same way. So I was kind of thinking they'll be good enough, but they'll probably be unspectacular champions, like so many Celtic teams in recent years have been, to be honest. But that performance yesterday was very good. I thought we will talk about Kelly's failings and the fact maybe Kelly had probably half an eye on another game, but nonetheless, the way they knocked the ball about was very good. They created a lot of really good chances, and it was much more like a sort of pre-departure Brendan Rodgers team compared to the kind of quite turgid style that they had last season. Bothered last season, he'll just claim was transitional, but I don't think you had to transition that much from what was there before, and there was no real excuse for how kind of dull they were last season. But you saw a lot of what you kind of expected from his teams yesterday. A lot of dynamism in midfield, a lot of really good wing play. Kyogo looked bright again, maybe back to his best, and Hatate likewise, who had a pretty poor year of it last year. They weren't troubled that much defensively, and Schmeichel didn't have a lot to do, so you can't really talk about that side of things, and maybe that's still their Achilles heel, but it was a lot better than I expected from Celtic, I would say.
Yeah, I was quite... I mean, down is maybe a strong word, because it's hard to be down on a team that you think are going to run away with the title. But I was quite down on Celtic's kind of overall season as a whole. I thought fans were just going to have to expect kind of much of the same as last year. A team that looked kind of almost unmotivated at times and just kind of going through the motions, because I think it just seemed to me that there was an overconfidence they had the title in the bag. And I mean, with good reason.
They nearly didn't though.
With good reason at the time, because you did think that Rangers were not going to come back in and make it any sort of competition, and then ultimately did do that. And Celtic kind of finished the season a wee bit stronger, but even then, still looking to look at the performance in the cup final and a couple of others, it never really got going, and it was very night and day from. I mean, it was totally different from Rodgers' first season when he was back at Celtic. But even like overall, they were still a good team to watch throughout his tenure, and it was weird to see Celtic look so pedestrian at so many times last year. Now, there could still lose O'Reilly. There's talk today on Sky Sports News that Brighton are in discussions with Celtic about his transfer. It looks like he might go before the end of the window. Hatate's another one. Those will be two huge misses for Celtic. But just if a team, if they can play like this, if they can play with that, because this is what I said about that initial Rodgers team. When you're coming in to manage one of the old firm, you really want to have a manager that utilises the fact that your players are more talented. Like, you don't want a manager that's going to be like playing like slow football, because that just allows the opposition in Scotland to get set up. You don't want a manager that's going to do kind of kick and rush, because that just kind of brings you down to the level of your opposition. You want somebody that wants to play a style of football that is kind of intricate but quick, high tempo, so then you're just blowing teams away. Rodgers done that in his first spell, but he didn't do that last season. But if he brings that back, and indications are that they're managing to do it, like pre-season is pre-season, but they played like this as well. If he's able to do that, even if Hatate and O'Reilly go, they're not going to miss too much by it, because they're still going to have much better players than anybody else are playing in Scottish football. It's just going to likely hurt them even further in Europe. But they're kind of starting from the kind of bottom there anyway, in terms of how they've been competing in the Champions League over recent seasons.
Yeah, I think that's what you've kind of got from them. They're nowhere near equipped to be able to compete in Europe this season. Now, more so than usual, the draw will be very important with the league phase of the Champions League, because it's like just a completely different structure to they're used to. They can just get very lucky and play some other teams who are I mean, you can do that with any draw, but it's like the way it's structured and everyone's playing against a completely different set of teams. Like, and nobody really knows what you need because you've got these 8 games. How many points are you going to need to get into that top 24? Who knows? Maybe like they only need like 3 wins in a draw. Maybe that's possible. I don't know. I think no one's really. I think it's going to be kind of everyone learning on the job with that, to be honest. But so you can't write Europe off. But I think their priority this season should be to build a team in his image, get them back up, and then actually, which they won't do, but actually invest next year in the quality upgrades that they need. So yeah, I think you're right. Like they now look like the pre-season has maybe actually been useful rather than just a money-making exercise, and I think that's maybe all they really need.
Yeah, I think as well they do need a little more up top, and seeing James Forrest start a game in this year is kind of a wee bit concerning. But there are players that are injured, and also Nicholas Kuhn. He is somebody that is starting to look a bit better for Celtic. He showed, I think he showed something last year, but there was no kind of consistency to it. But again, and once more pre-season, I'd always take a very massive pinch of salt. But he looked very sharp in this one, and if we can just add another player to that front line on either side of Kyogo and possibly Ida coming back, and that'll help them as well, because that was obviously a huge problem last year, is that they just didn't get enough consistency from the players in the wide positions, and it was like so night and day from even the campaign before when Abada was scoring for fun, and you always know what you're going to kind of get out of Maida in terms of his play. We should probably move on to talk about Killie though before we go to our next game. And Craig, was this kind of a case that actually let me phrase it this way: are Killie maybe set up to be the team that's hampered the most by the extra demands of playing in European football in these first few weeks of the season?
I mean, maybe I think I said right at the start, like this fixture's maybe a good one, because if you are going to write off some games in it, and I don't mean, I'm sure Derek McInnes did not write off this game before kickoff, and it's not like it was a nothing team that went out. It was still a strong Killie team. There were still players there that could hurt Celtic and have hurt Celtic in the past, but he made a number of changes. He leaves out Danny Armstrong. He kind of rotated the midfield a bit. We're obviously missing defenders. Already Robbie Dees was suspended from this, having got sent off in the last game of last season. Joe Wright got injured in midweek. So down to the bare bones, before they signed the new left-back Bainbridge on loan from Sunderland on Friday, I think we were down to 2 defenders we would have had available for this game. So there were a lot of things going on that probably made it a bit tricky. I'm not really willing to judge that yet in terms of how hampered we'll be. The good thing is Killie started last season fairly poorly and it didn't really matter, because they turned it around in the second half of the season. And McInnes has done this loads of times with Aberdeen. It's not like he's new to it. Like, he has gone through these games. He knows what you need to do when you're going Thursday, Sunday. Hopefully, now having seen the draw coming out today and the fact that it would most likely be FC Copenhagen in the playoff round, I don't think it's going to be for more than 4 more games at a maximum in midweek. So that in itself, hopefully we get through the Tromsø one. That's probably a 50-50 tie, I think. Can
a Scottish team get through a 50-50 tie, please? We got that a couple last year. We got Hibs with beating Lucerne, Hearts beating Rosenborg. But we certainly need it this year. We need teams to contribute, everybody to contribute to that coefficient, so we can at least stay in the top 12 and continue that lovely bounty when you get third place. Or the Scottish Cup, usually third place.
We'll wait and see. But that one, but I think, the fact it's probably only going to really affect August. It's a pretty fit team. It's an older team. Like, there's players in key positions that are maybe a bit older, and that could have an impact. But I think there may be 2 or 3 players short still, but those will be late August loans rather than anything else. So I think at that point, if Killie have won 2 or even won 1 league game by the time we're out of Europe and are sitting like 7th or 8th or something, I think the impact from that will be minimal, especially given that this one that's kind of been put out the way now is when you're mostly going to lose. But there are question marks. I think it's been interesting with how the squad's been used so far. Bruce Anderson's not had a lot of minutes. He didn't come on until stoppage time in the game in midweek, which I thought was quite interesting. I wasn't expecting him to be a starter, but I thought we would have seen him a little bit more. Bobby Wales come on ahead of him yesterday, but again, maybe that's just about getting Bobby Wales some minutes once the game was done anyway. But that's interesting kind of subplot to it. The signing in Daba is a really good one, but he seems to be injured at the moment, so might take a little while to see that. So I think, maybe Kelly will be a bit of a slow burner this season. I'm fairly confident about the season. I think, it's basically the same squad as last season. So why wouldn't I be confident in that? But I think like last year, it may be a bit of a slow burner and it might take a little bit of time to get up to speed. And I think that might have been the case even if we weren't in Europe, to be honest, but that's probably sort of accelerating it a little bit. But big game on Thursday night, and then it's St Johnstone at the weekend at home. That's a game you would be hoping to win. Absolutely. If we don't win that one, if we don't win either of the next two, that'll be when there might be a few worries creeping in.
Okay, let's go to our next fixture, and that was the first game of the season, officially. Kicking off at Tynecastle, 12:30 on Saturday. Hearts 0, Rangers 0. I certainly think Hearts, the Hearts fans afterwards were kind of a bit gutted that Hearts didn't manage to win this game, but Rangers themselves certainly had the chances to win it. In particular, chances falling to the same man on 3 occasions, Cyril Dessers. There's not a lot to kind of say about Rangers because it's still hard to tell because they are simultaneously trying to pull players in the door while pushing others out. So you could just imagine in a couple of weeks' time this team's going to look completely different. But Dessers is here for the time being, and he's the one constant. He's the one guy you can rely on. You can rely on to be Cyril Dessers, and that is quite unreliable in front of goal.
That one though, however, that hits both the bar and the post. You can,
and hits Kai Rolls as well. To be fair,
you can get pulled up for saying you're unlucky for not getting that on target, getting it past the defender, etc. But there are times where you think, as well as this guy maybe being quite an inconsistent finisher, he has been quite unlucky as well. And I think, regardless of how, I don't know if he will be leaving or not, like this month or not, but I wonder, like, his legacy is going to be a very funny one with his goal scoring record compared to like the perception people have of him. And I think maybe Torrey Andre flows the comparison because it's like he's done quite well, like if you just looked at his numbers, and yet nobody will really have a good word to say about him. So he's a very funny player.
Yeah. It was more the kind of chances the first half is where you could play stick point the finger of blame at him. The best one, the Rills one, it comes off Rills. If it doesn't come off Rills, he probably headers that beyond Zander Clark, and then even then he's very unlucky that it hits both the bar and post and doesn't go in. But Rangers overall, like massive shades of Celtic coming to Tynecastle at the start of the 2021-22 campaign, which is where Postecoglou was just in the door. I think Kyogo was only fit to come off the bench. They still hadn't made another kind of few signings, and even that season it took Celtic about 2-3 months to really get up to speed, and then they strengthened further in January when they signed Tannadice, and that's when they won that game at Celtic Park and eventually went on to win the title. Not sure that's going to happen to Rangers this season, but you can just see so much of like the setup in this game. Like Ben Davies still playing in the back four. Like he got bullied completely by Kenneth Vargas. James Tavernier, it's one of the quietest games I can remember him having at Tynecastle. I just kept forgetting he was actually on the park. I mean, Scott Wright still starting for Rangers in games like this. You're thinking, how we still got to this point? Even some of the better, like Tom Lawrence is probably one of the better players of the day, but you're still thinking, like, you're not going to be in the Rangers team that starts. Then Cortez is looking decent enough, not too threatening, but decent enough. He gets injured. So it's just kind of, it's hard to really speak about Rangers at this point in time because it's just going to look so different by the end of this month.
Or it could look different, or it could be that they can't get rid of any of the players and it looks exactly the same.
Oh, that would be very funny. That would be very funny.
But yeah, I think it is that I looked at that starting line. As I said, I didn't see this game, but I looked at the starting lineup when it came in, and I was like, that looks like the lineup that you would field in your second pre-season game. So they're playing, when they're playing like Fleetwood Town away, and like rather than the team that they are setting out to start a league campaign, because it's so disjointed. in terms of like guys like Scott Wright being there. I like Scott Wright. I think he's a bit underrated as a player, but he's not a Rangers starter for a team, or he's not. He could not be a starter for a good Rangers team. The only type of Rangers team that is ever going to start Scott Wright is going to be one that has issues. I know he started a European final. I know he had actually a good run in that Europa League campaign, but it's just stuff like that where you're like, and Davies is. I think it was Ewan in the group chat said he wouldn't start for any team in the Premiership, and you can kind of understand that. Like, I think I don't know how strictly true that is, but you can kind of understand where he's coming from in that you're not going to suddenly get better by playing for a worse team. Like, you're not suddenly not going to get bullied by centre forwards. Maybe you're just going to look the same as the other ones, but he has never at any point looked like a competent defender at this level. Some of those Champions League performances in that infamous season were embarrassing, and he's just not good at all. He probably won't be around for long, but again, they need someone to be able to sign him. I mean, Liverpool signed him once, so nothing's off the table with him, but I just don't think he's at all good.
No, but Hearts are looking better.
Yeah, I don't know if Kelly are in competition with Hearts. I don't think we were really in competition with Hearts last season, but as a team that I was looking at, kind of like they're finished ahead of us, maybe if they get a bit worse and we can strengthen a wee bit, you never know. Hearts look to be getting stronger from last season. They're still early days, but the transfer business that's been done, especially I would say the non-SPFL transfer business, because I think there's doubts to me about the guys they've brought in from SPFL clubs, but the players they've brought in from outside, I like the look of, and if they can get this Colombian left back, I don't know where that stands just now, and
he was at the
game. That would be a massive signing as well.
Yeah,
so
he was at the game, and that was probably So Gerard, so I could probably go through them. So Gerard Taylor started at right back, contention for the man of the match in this game. I thought he'd maybe run out a little bit of steam in the second period, but like his first half in particular, he's kind of charging runs down the wing. Not only that, just his defensive play. He was really good defensively, and that's kind of when you're signing somebody who's already getting attention in pre-season for darting down the flank, you kind of wonder, okay, he's going to be good at that. So what's he bad at? And I did wonder how he would cope defensively, but no, he looked great against Rangers. Penrice.
I'm not going to pass judgment on a league I know nothing about, but you wonder if the tempo coming from the Costa Rican league to the Scottish Premiership might be a bit higher, and so you can kind of naturally understand them maybe running out of steam in probably what will be a massive game. So that's one to watch. But yeah, he looks impressive. Penrice
on the other side didn't do much going forward, and that's where you'd hope the Colombian international, like this, it's got the potential to be another Oshiriwa, but you're like, bloody hell, how are we managing to get this guy? If he comes in, then he would maybe provide a bit more going forward, because that was the one thing I think with Penrice's performance is that he wasn't maybe as aggressive as he maybe needed to be going forward, but still had a decent game, still good defensively. And then further forward, Jan Danda, I thought looked only one game, but I thought looked fairly comfortable in this Hearts team. He just kind of had the look of a Hearts player. Like I don't know if that's like, it's kind of like almost like a vacuous thing to say, but I think you know what I mean. Like when you're finished third place last year, you want to finish third this year, you've got a good chance of doing it. You want him to come in and look like he belongs in his new surroundings, and I thought Danda especially did that. I thought Spittle less so. However, he came on and was placed on the right. He was just a straight swap with him and Danda. Hearts played a 4-4-2 with, or maybe a 4-4-1-1, probably more accurate to say, with Lawrence Shankland playing in the hole with Vargas up top, and you had Mackay and Danda kind of as these narrow attacking midfielders that were coming really central at times. So it was just kind of like a narrow midfield, and then you were getting the width from the fullbacks. And with Taylor, that was certainly working. And if Naismith wants to continue this blueprint, then it could work on the other side as well. But Spittle went on, he went to right mid, and I know he's got plenty of experience playing there, but Graham said to us that if you want Blair Spittle to play well, play him in the centre, and that's where he's at his best. He can, quote unquote, can play anywhere across the midfield because he's got experience of doing it, but he's not actually that good at doing it. And so when he came on the right, I wasn't really sure, but we moved him inside for like the last, it was like 5-6 minutes injury time, and I think the subs were made with about 6 to go, so it was like the final 12 minutes he was moved inside. And I thought at that point you started to see Spittle's, a very small sample size, but you started to see his quality a bit. He was able to like turn, get his head up, look for passes. His hearts were starting to sit in a little bit. And then even like Oyegoke, like steady enough, him coming on. And even Boateng, I thought looked good when he came in. He was getting his body about, disrupting Rangers, playing quite a crucial role in those dying minutes, as Rangers were the team that upped the pressure after Naismith made what I thought was an error in judgment to change Hart's system and just go to a kind of variation of 4-5-1 with Shankland up top by himself. It just meant that Rangers were able to then push on a little bit more, camp Hearts in their half, because they know they didn't have Vargas at the tip of the attack anymore to exploit that space. And also just without a second player alongside Shankland, Hearts just struggled to make it stick more. So I was a wee bit frustrated by that, but overall I think Naismith got his tactics pretty well, and yeah, every single player coming in seemed like there was reason to be optimistic that they will be good additions.
Yeah, and I think Boateng is like, he strikes me as a very Hearts player. I would be worried if you were relying on him as a starter every week, but I don't think you will be. No. But as a squad option, like he's very in keeping with the Hearts ethos. I'll say no more, but the Hearts ethos of play. Craig Cairns will be cross at me if I had anything else in there, but everyone who's listening knows exactly the ethos that I'm talking about. And Daniel Boateng, he's that shit guy who used to play for Hibs.
Yeah. We've actually,
Boateng.
Do you know what, Craig? We've actually missed that ethos of recent seasons. I think we've been, ever since we came back to the top flight, I think we've generally been a team that's been full of quite small players. Like, if you think of like Devlin and Beningame being like our starting midfield two for that season for a lot of it, Harren did come in and play an awful lot, and I thought that we kind of had a bit more balance to the team when Harren was in it, because we finally had like a big body who could play a wee bit, but also kind of shove people off the ball. And that's what Boateng's going to bring to a defence, like a central midfield core, which is still pretty much the same as that. Like, Boateng is the only big body in that. Everybody else is like 5'10" or shorter.
I like how you have the Hearts pill jar that Cammy Devlin is now been described as not being in that ethos just because he's small. Like, it doesn't matter, he just kicks fuck out of everyone all the time, and that's all he does. He's not tall enough, so let's please replace him straight away. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's not a criticism, and I think when Naismith, given everything we know about Stephen Naismith, you're pretty sure that that's the type of player that he's going to want to have as well. And it's always like, I've always felt it has been like that with Hearts teams. These guys have been there so that there have been ball players who can get the protection to play. And I think you see that with his Hearts. So you mentioned Vargas. Like, I think he is going to have a tremendous season this year. I think I really like him. I think there's so much to like about him. I think if things go well with him, he could have the kind of breakout season. I mean, he was good last season, but I think like the season where people properly take notice and he starts getting like the moves everywhere. As you said, it's interesting setup, but yeah, I like a lot of what Hearts are doing.
Right, let's move on to our last game, and that is Motherwell 0, Ross County 0 for the only 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday this weekend. And not a great game, has to be said. Both sets of fans described it as boring, and Motherwell fans in particular.
One advert.
Yeah, Motherwell fans in particular not entirely impressed with that being what their team served up on what was a nice Saturday afternoon in Lanarkshire, but the attendance, I think, was down as well on last season. And that's a bit of a concern for Motherwell fans, especially when they've had the summer that they have, where there's been a bit of division amongst the club and maybe amongst the support as well. But not going to start with them. We're going to start with County. Craig, is Ross Laidlaw... So, actually, before I ask this question, let me just kind of explain the backstory. Last year, I had this theory that St Johnstone were not going to go down because they had Dimitar Mitov, and teams that have good goalkeepers don't get relegated from the Scottish top flight. And it proved to be. St Johnstone were a dog shit team, but they stayed up because they had like the second best goalie in the entire league. Now, Ross Laidlaw is not of that quality, but he made a terrific save in this one from Ewan Miller, I believe it is, the young Motherwell left wing back. He had another decent save in the game, but this is the real one that you're like, no, that is a top drawer save. That is a save that the majority of keepers in this league are not necessarily making. But is Ross Laidlaw of the calibre that will mean that County stay in the top flight, or do they need a wee bit more than that?
It's hard to say. So Ewan Wilson is the guy's name. You're mixing him up with Lennon Miller, but
sorry, yeah, Ewan Wilson.
I think it is Ewan again that usually says that Laidlaw is like your bang average Premiership goalkeeper. It's like you don't want your goalkeeper to be worse than Ross Laidlaw, but if he's any better than Ross Laidlaw, you'll be quite happy. And whether that still holds is hard to tell, but he was obviously replaced for a big chunk of last season. That's now come back around. He, to me, he is more than capable of being an all right first choice goalkeeper at this level, but given the squad that they have assembled, which is interesting, it's hard to tell because some of the guys that have come in you don't know about yet. Ronan Hale had a really good League Cup campaign, quite highly rated, I think, from Northern Irish football. Maybe he'll be good, but there are a lot of the guys who are still there from last season, to me, weren't that good last season. So that in itself, it's a very tough squad to look at, and maybe you want a Mitov level goalkeeper to keep them out, and the fact they don't have that could be a problem, but also Laidlaw's probably not going to chuck points away the way that some other goalkeepers could. I mean, talking about their opponents, I think Motherwell are in an odd position where they maybe don't have a clear first choice goalkeeper, and we didn't really see much of what Aston Oxborough, who's been their sub goalkeeper for, I was going to say 2 seasons potentially, is maybe stepping up, and they've got the guy in on loan, Heggie, I don't remember who's in loan from, West Ham maybe.
Yeah, it's West Ham.
So they're in that position where that spells danger to me. You don't know who your goalkeeper is, and you don't know if either of them. It's okay rotating between 2 fairly good goalkeepers, that's fine. If you want to do that, knock yourself out. If you don't know who your goalkeeper is and you don't know if either of them are good, that's a recipe for disaster. Whereas with Ross County, they know they have a goalkeeper who is probably going to be 7 out of 10. Could be enough. I think I've tipped them to finish second bottom this season, but if he has a good season, that could be enough to push their head above that.
It's going to be close between them and Motherwell, and so we've yet to see St Johnstone in action, and who knows, St Johnstone could end up really surprising us, but let's say that, for argument's sake, at this point in time, St Johnstone are in that trio. For the first weekend, it really doesn't look like there's anything to dispel or feeling that there's going to be 3 teams at the bottom of the league in County, Motherwell and St Johnstone, and you're going to be surprised if it's anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the rest of the league, and I mean, Dundee United could have been... There's someone who you thought maybe they could end up in that because they're a bit of an unknown, and even some of the players they've brought in are unknowns. But you kind of already saw enough when we spoke about them that they do have a lot going for them as an attacking force. Who knows, maybe they could be part of that as well. But yeah, everyone else, you've got 6 teams who, the top 6 from last season, none of them have really got much worse. I think Dundee have maybe got a wee bit worse, but maybe not lots worse. And then you've got Aberdeen and Hibs, who... Aberdeen lately have got a bit better. Hibs are a bit of an unknown, but I don't think they will be... They're not going to be a shambles on the park, in my opinion.
Their squad on paper is certainly not worse than these 2 teams or Saints. They have got banter year potential to just be the worst team, just from everything absolutely falling to bits, as we've seen with Hibs in the past, and we've seen with Hearts, and we've seen with Dundee United. There's just sometimes a team that just has the season from hell, and Hibs are best contenders for that. For a team that on paper should be doing a lot better than it is, just to get into this horrendous kind of culture where they just lose constantly. But I would still be surprised. I think Hibs have they've not got much money left to be excited, but they'll do enough wheeling and dealing to bring in some players that will, at the very least, keep them 9th.
You would think so. So I think you're right that these, as it stands, are the 3 that you would expect to be. I don't know where I stand after this game. I think it was like not a lot to like about either team.
Yeah,
really.
Just not a lot of like attacking players on show in general, and that was kind of like, look at the Motherwell side of it as well. Like Motherwell were actually the 2 teams together, so they're both playing 3 at the back. I mean, neither of them have got particularly great ball playing defenders. County have got Harman and Brown, Harman, I would say, at the Scottish Premiership level, has to either be a wing back or a left midfielder. I don't think he's defensively good enough to play fullback, and he does get forward. So you'd probably categorise him as quite attacking. Brown on the other side, he gets forward a bit, but he's hardly somebody that's going to make too much happen around the opposing box. But that's the kind of better of the two. On the other side, you got O'Donnell for Motherwell. I think at this stage of his career, 32 years old, Stephen O'Donnell does no longer have the legs to be the effective wing back that he once was, or like the effective attacking fullback that he used to be as well. And Wilson had a good game, probably up there for Motherwell's best player, but he lacks a bit of pace as well. So they've now got two wing backs that don't have much pace, and then the rest of the Motherwell team, that defence is not a defence that you're going to rely too much on the players to kind of step out and to be kind of auxiliary midfielders to really make the three at the back system work. And then they're pushing Lennon Miller into a number 10 role, pretty much like him and Halliday kind of alongside each other in the more advanced position, Dravkovsky sitting. That's like three guys who normally you would play as like a number 6. So that they're just kind of leaving the forwards to fend for themselves, and neither of them were particularly good at making the ball stick. So just two teams, their sides are just a real lack of attacking quality in both.
On Miller in particular, I think that's really counterproductive, like for a long term for Motherwell as well, because I mean, you know how much of an immense talent he is, and clearly at the Premiership level, he's good enough to play as that number 10. He's got enough creative ability, but fundamentally, Motherwell are trying to sell. Like Lennon Miller is basically in a shop window every single time he plays for Motherwell. That's the whole. To be honest, that's the whole point of this. But we know that he is not going to be at Motherwell for very long. They're going to want to sell him. They're going to want to sell him for really big money. Teams who are signing him at any higher level, he doesn't have the ability to play at a higher level as a number 10. He's not immensely creative enough to do that. Where he's going to play his career at the top level is going to be as a deeper midfielder, as a passing deep midfielder who's got the ability to kind of play with both feet, knows when to pick the right pass, quite a clever player. So to me, you just need to pick him there. Pick him there. Doesn't matter what you have to do. If you have to stick someone worse in an attacking midfield role, play him in that position and work everything else around that. It's interesting though with the defence as well, because they paid a fee to sign the guy Balmer from, was it Wimbledon that he came from? And he, or Crystal Palace, I think he was on loan at Wimbledon, but he hasn't played a minute so far as I can tell. Did he maybe play in the first League Cup game, and then he's not been seen again? And he's been on the bench in every game ever since. And that was even though he scored in that game.
Also,
I don't know what's going on there.
Filip Stuparevic completely dropped out the squad. They had actually, is that five new signings? Yeah, 5 new signings that were all on the bench for this one and didn't play a single minute.
Interesting. Given that they've got, I mean, I don't know, Brian Caldwell's more like the chief executive, but he's obviously a kind of new member of staff that's in who's kind of overlooking things. There's a lot going on at that club, and I think Kettlewell is maybe in kind of just crisis management mode as a man. It's just like, get a team on the park, let's try and stay up. I genuinely think that's their plan for this season, rather than there being anything bigger than that. Like, there doesn't seem to be a lot of strategy. They've wasted their whole summer focusing or worrying about this quote-unquote investment that's really a takeover that thankfully for I think everyone involved didn't go through, but it's put them back because I think football operations have been distracted by it. I think it's natural. The supporters have been distracted by it, and I'm never going to write Motherwell off because they are an unwrite-offable team. They could just as easily finish third in the league and win the Scottish Cup this season. But there is a lot going on there that, to me, like, you look at that squad, it doesn't look like Zach Robinson being your striker who you bring in. You saw a big chance miss for him. There's a lot to like about Robinson. I always thought when he was at Dundee, and both, I mean, he was pretty good in the Championship, and even last season, you never watch him and think, I can't see how you've got to this level. But also, he doesn't score nearly enough goals. He's 3, I think, last season. Misses a good chance in this game. Is he going to be the guy that scores the goals? They've brought in this, paid a pretty big fee, but it's an A-League striker. That's like magic beans money. You don't have a clue what's going on. He could be brilliant, or he could be back in the A-League in 5 months' time on loan. You don't know. So a lot of question marks about Motherwell more than anything else.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I look at this opening day team. Like, I've been really down on St Johnstone this summer. They are my pick to go down. But I'm looking at that Motherwell team after the opening day, and if that is the team that you're rolling with for a lot of the season, on paper, there's really not a lot of difference there with that St Johnstone side. I'd say Motherwell are a bit better defensively, and that would hold them in better stead in a relegation battle. But I do think that St Johnstone might have a bit more going for them up top, and Jesus Christ, that's saying something. Right, Craig, I think that'll do us.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much to everybody for listening, and we will be back soon enough. Barring any last-minute issues, it should be Sean and Telfer on Thursday to talk about the first weekend of the lower league season and the most interesting games to take place there. So until then, take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you soon.